Well, hello, welcome everybody to Torture Time with Thomas. I'm here with my best friend Don Prager and our very good new friend Dr. Brian Mcwhinney. Is that how you say it?
Yes, good job.
Mcwhinney. Okay. So I'm gonna I, I'm gonna introduce you real quick because I think people need to know this. Give me just a second. Pull this up. All right. So our friend here, the good doctor, is a prominent American psycholinguist known for his contributions to the field of cognitive science, linguistics, and most importantly, language acquisition. He is particularly renowned for his work on the child's, which is a not an anagram. What's the word for acronym? An acronym for Child Language Data Exchange System Project, which involves the collection and analysis of natural language data from children's language development. He has conducted research on various aspects of language acquisition, including syntax, semantics, and morphology. So this man knows everything that we could possibly want to ask him about linguistics. Don, did you have anything?
Uh,
I mean, I'm just here to start listening, and when I have questions coming in, I'll have a question running in. So
Sure.
keep going, Thomas.
Okay, no, it's fine. Um, I love your bio, Brian, and I really want to talk a lot about that. But at first, what I usually ask people is, what is holding your interest? What is piquing your interest right now? What are you most interested in?
that's great. I'm glad you asked that because
Yeah.
that always gets your guest motivated.
Yes.
I've been really thinking. Well, of course, the large language models are great, and that's sort of out in the world. But in my own mind, I've been trying to develop a theory of basically emergentism. And it's I would love to hear you guys interacting with Noam Chomsky, because it's been a dialogue in a way we never talk to each other.
Well, Gnome has come to talk to us, I think, once or
A
twice.
couple times,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, he has. Yeah, I
He,
spoke with him
and his
before.
politics is great, but my linguistics differs from his in
Right.
many ways. And I try to put my finger on it because there are times when I do agree with him, and that's fine. But it really came down to this notion of what does it mean for explanation about language.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote a beautiful paper way back when about talking about levels of adequacy, and he said observational, descriptive, and explanatory. Well, you
Yes.
never quite got to the explanatory side. In my humble opinion. So what I'm interested in is explanation. Why does language have the structure it does? And that's what I'm really interested in. And it's such a great question to ask. I think.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so, as you write, among the many puzzles that language presents to the developmental psychologist, perhaps the most fascinating is the relative ease with which a toddler picks up the first language. Now, here's what I wanted to ask you. Are you in line with Chomsky's, well, this is a very general question, but his approach to biolinguistics?
You guys are great. You come in on all the good questions right away. Yeah, yeah. Well, so it's a great term. We share interest in the term, and that's about it, I think.
Okay.
Interesting.
My notion of biolinguistics is, I think, much more biological than his. But
Yeah, you talked about Darwinian processes.
yeah, I'm very much a fan of Darwin, and
Yep.
really the whole of population genetics, and really to me the most important thing are the levels of organization in biological processes.
Mm.
So I've worked a lot thinking, particularly as my model is protein synthesis, and the levels in which the different structures of proteins emerge really in a fairly quick period. I mean, milliseconds as you go through the ribosome.
Yeah.
But you're going through one structure to another structure to another structure and to another structure, and that has really guided my thinking a lot. I mean, you can see that in cosmology too, in geology and everywhere. But biology is really, I think, so important to understand that language has a biological basis,
Yeah.
which then, in terms of Noam's view about language evolution, are very different from mine.
Yeah.
And his views about the genetic determination and really the fundamental nature of language and the way
Hmm.
cognition works in the brain, uh, but there are places where we agree, which is really fun too.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, what about the idea of, universal grammar modules, in
Well,
the brain?
I would say, of course, we have a universal grammar. That one of the great things is he takes these positions that can't be refuted because they're almost tautologies, really.
They're
I mean,
tautologies, yeah.
Okay, there's
basically,
tautologies.
you know.
So how is
There's a language
universal grammar a
acquisition
tautology?
device. Of course, there's language acquisition device. You
Yeah.
know,
Don had a question for you.
yeah. But no, the
What?
universal grammar
Yeah.
is there. We all have words. So that is universal. He talks about Martians coming to Earth, and they would say we're all speaking the human language, which Steve Pinker does too, and that's true. Martians would say you're all using words, and you're opening up your mouth, and things
Hmm.
like that. But when it comes to the actual details of grammar, they really are not. They're really so incommensurate across different languages, and the variation is enormous. So that's really where the question of, well, where does the structure come from? Why are there these differences? But the one thing that he has put his finger on is this notion of recursion.
Mm.
And he really worked with Mark Hauser on this, and then Mark backed out of it. But he this is really the nub of his career, has been the idea that language has a recursive process. And guess what? It's not unique to Noam Chomsky. This has
Probably
been
not.
around in linguistics for 100 years, at least, from the
What,
Poles.
like the times of Saussure and all that?
Um,
Maybe
well,
not that far back.
who are you thinking?
Ferdinand de Saussure, is that how you say his name?
So
Saussure?
sure, so sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
Saussure.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
To some degree, so sure, that particularly there were Polish grammarians, Ajdukiewicz, so more in the 40s and the 50s.
Okay.
But they do a thing called dependency grammar, and now almost all computational linguists use dependency grammar. I mean, I use it in my database too, and
Yeah.
a lot of psycholinguists now believe that Noam's ideas about the deep structure are really not psychologically real. They're really good for linguistic description.
So they're like conceptual archetypes, maybe like the unconscious from Jung or something like that.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that link. That's great. Yeah.
Okay.
It depends on how you interpret Jung, doesn't it?
It does. He's kind of Eastern.
Well, I think
So
again, the main point about recursion is that we do put words together. So that somewhere along the evolutionary tract, we got words, okay, and then that's a whole story. We should talk about it. We could spend half an hour on
We
words,
can, yeah.
yes,
right?
yes, we can.
But once we got words, then guess what? The next thing you can do is you can put them together.
And make sentences and combine
Yeah,
this.
and
And
the
is that what you're
phrase-
talking about? Like you have the small proteins that do synthesis, like that same levels where we start with simple and from
right,
that
right.
build
You've got a
complex
chain of
ideas and
amino
concepts.
acids, and
Okay.
before you know it, they form these little sheets or helices, okay, which is the secondary process. Then those form a bigger sort of, and this is all being done by constraints that operate on a level. So the constraints that operate when you just have the amino acids in the chain are hydrogen bonding and van der Waals forces. Later on, you get these other kind of constraints that have to do with, they're basically constraints across the chain. And I don't know the details really.
That doesn't matter,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But
but they're enough that the new structures emerge. And
and that's the same with words and languages.
you got it. So
Okay.
well, you just got your PhD. You're done.
Sign me up,
He's
Professor.
yeah, Don Don's a genius. So
but if somewhere along the line, now the other argument on this is from Mark Steedman, who's a computer scientist, really clever guy.
okay.
Yeah, he talks about the fact that already in actions, motion, action planning, we already have recursion and combination of activities. If you're going to pour milk, you have to lift up your arm, you have to know to turn, and so on. And any primate is already ready for this. So we had that system, and as soon as we got words, those two come together, and boom.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but not that simple. There are brain structures that had to be really refined. A lot. I mean, there's a whole rich story about all the things that had to happen, along
Oh
the
yeah, God, yeah. I mean, imagine that. Imagine if we had to write that story out, right? It'd be
well,
ridiculous.
people have tried, and yeah, but the brain changes and the social changes too.
Yes. Yeah, the social dynamics,
Because
the sociology changes. Go ahead, Don.
while I hear the idea of like biology determining language, what about all of the social changes, the communal ways in which we teach how to speak and how to think about certain words, right? Because I think that especially in academia, we have a very strict way we teach about how you should write, how you should think about these ideas, how you should break them down. Does that play a role in this like compiling of how these languages are structured and shaped?
Yeah, there's a great example of this from one of my friends, a favorite linguist, Tom Givon, studied the emergence of relative clauses. Evidently, Sumerian did not, we're talking way back, right, 4,000
Yeah,
BC,
yeah,
right, did
yeah.
not have relative clauses. But
Well, it was cuneiform, right? It didn't have syntax.
well, I don't know. I'm not a,
Oh, okay.
what do you call
I
it?
thought that was maybe something
Yeah,
that I'd read
the
before.
specialty there goes beyond me. But
Yeah,
yeah, right. They wrote in cuneiform. But the point is that at a certain point in the development of Sumerian, they did introduce relative clauses. Okay, so, and we see that also in Germanic, well, early German, they didn't have relative clauses. Der Mann das, der geht in die Schule, kommt nicht. So they even you can still look at the German relative clause and you can see that it's the man, that guy who goes in.
yeah.
Okay, and I don't know how your German is, but
Oh,
Terrible.
you can see it still in the art relative pronoun, and there was a time when it didn't work that way, and now it still is. Just you're bringing in a relative clause. So languages have really developed more high. This is down trying to answer your question, that you develop more high level structures as you become more literate.
Hmm.
So that is really and we look at a lot of languages around the world. They don't need this fancy recursion that, well, we could get into recursion. That's a whole discussion. But they don't need some of these fancy structures.
okay.
Yeah, because
Is
they,
there an easy way to explain recursion for the audience?
well, the easiest is the relative clause.
Relative clause.
The man who went to the store likes bananas. So
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
man who went to the store. So the man likes bananas, and you jam in a relative clause.
Who went to the store, right?
Yeah, man
The
who went.
man with the brown hair. It's the man who likes to brush his hair with the brown
Right.
hair.
The
Right.
man who the girls took to the party. So you can have an object, so you can have different types of relative clause, and
Right.
Milton loves to talk about this stuff. This is his favorite proof of the importance of UG.
I
But
love this.
yeah, it is. It's great stuff.
I
But
love
so that's the embedded. In fact, there's this whole discussion about center embedded, so you can put a relative clause inside a relative clause inside. It's like a little babushka doll.
it.
Okay.
Those are impossible to process. That was one of Noam's first things with George Miller, when they found out that even though grammatically they're okay, people can't understand them. Okay. But if you put the relative clause at the end, this is the mouse that chased the rat, that ate the cat, that ate the bat. I can't do
Yeah.
that, that lived in the house that Jack built. Those are easy to process. So if it's a right attachment, if you put your relative clause on the right, no problem. You can do
At the end of the sentence, basically, end of the idea,
Yeah.
it's no problem. But if you put it beforehand, so Jack who built a house, then it becomes
Well,
different.
fine with Jack, that house that Jack built. Yeah, right.
Yeah, that has the mouse, the rat,
But it's the mouse that chased the cat, that ate the rat, that ate the cheese, I don't know what else.
all these lexical items being placed together.
Right,
That's interesting.
right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So computer scientists can look at that, and they call it tail recursion, and it shows that you don't have to build what you call a goal stack. You don't have to build a babushka doll. You just go boom, 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 boom. You just iterate. So the whole study of recursion. But I think that we've gotten so deep into gnome world at this point.
Yes.
Yes.
I want to figure out what is it specifically that you see as the mistakes that he's made. Where's the real meat of the disagreement between you two?
Well, he didn't look at. I don't think he really explained anything.
Okay.
I don't think he
So what do
really.
you think? What did you just describe it?
I mean, what we want to know is, where did this German relative clause come from?
Okay.
How did the Germans start to develop that structure? Why do we have for example, I gave John the ball, or I gave the ball to John. Why do we have these two different structures that are competing with each other? The giving, give him the ball versus gave the ball to him. Uh,
Okay.
the preposition,
Yeah.
and it, you get into such fascinating stuff, particularly. Some of it is structural, but some of it is social. A lot
Yeah.
of it, people use different things. Like in Pittsburgh, we can say, "This is the guy that I saw him at the mall." You
Oh,
know,
yeah. Okay.
this is the guy that I saw at the mall. This is the guy that I saw him at the mall.
Saw him at the. I get what you're
Yeah, well, I
saying.
mean that's perfectly good in Pittsburgh. So
Yeah.
this is called resumption. And Chinese does that. And how come? I just
Yeah.
why do?
So Chinese they do this is the guy I saw him at the mall.
Yeah, yeah. This is the guy that I saw at the mall. But I can say in Pittsburgh, this is the guy that I saw him at the mall.
Yeah. Adding the him there is the
It's the
superfluous part.
resumptive pronoun. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But Chinese does that. So
It's weird.
it's a Pittsburgh thing, and you just kind of get into the Pittsburgh talk, and before you know, I think I went out yesterday, and I said, by the way, our back porch is really slippy. It was slippery, right? Slippy.
Hmm.
So it's great. You can see the development in Icelandic of people, young people in Reykjavik are initiators of a certain type of passive voice that is then spreading around Iceland, and eventually they're used in certain situations. So this is called sociolinguistics, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is how language comes. People
Yeah.
people go off in this direction or that.
Yeah. Languages are descriptions of how they're used in social construct, and how they're used in the social construct
Yeah.
itself.
So
That makes me think of something. Maybe this is a bit tangential. Is there any research about the development of language now that we're more interconnected with like through an online space? Are
yes,
there mannerisms being brought up from group to group and
yeah, yeah. Well, of course, the emojis, right? But
yeah.
yeah, but I haven't really yet seen a clear and there's a lot of terminology, right? I mean,
Oh yeah.
trolls and everything, right?
Oh yeah. A ridiculous amount of terminology has been made in the last 25
Right.
years.
So terminology is huge, but I haven't seen any new syntactic structures.
Okay.
But
No.
but
No, I haven't either.
phraseology is like "I'm dead." I guess I knew what "I'm dead." Have you heard that one?
Yeah, it means it was funny and now you're laughing like you can't breathe anymore.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
Right.
the phraseology is constantly changing
So
with all these
so
new
all
memes and
those,
everything.
yeah.
I can't keep up.
The syntax itself is slower to change, but there
Yeah.
are places where it can be changed, and then they move. Like the passive, I got taken to the mall or whatever. But there are places where the language is really rigid. I mean, my favorite is German gender marking, and it's really hard to. The system is so interlocked that it's really hard to break out one piece, because as soon as you break out one piece, all the other pieces would start to fall apart.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Language is so fascinating.
It is. It's one of my favorite things to talk about because it all really comes down to semantics when you're talking about philosophy, physics, anything. So,
Yeah, of course. Yeah, the whole linguistic turn in philosophy is an interesting one too.
yeah, yeah. And me and Don are a bit obsessed with psychology and philosophy and all this kind of stuff. And so, I get excited when anybody wants to talk about linguistics because I have a lot to learn myself. But we'll veer back on topic a little bit. Can on here you said my approach to this problem, you were talking about the non-explanatory, you said the ease with which children master their first language contrasts with the more painful and incomplete process of learning a second language in adulthood. And we talked about that a little bit. But the next part, and I want to get into a question here, it says, my approach to this problem views language acquisition as an emergent process. Now, you spoke about that at the first for a moment, but can you elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it does go to back to the what we were talking about evolution, but that at some point children bring in their words, and one of my I sort of feel like this is one of my contributions to the field is this idea of item-based patterns. That what a child learns a thing, well, of course they learn the word apple and the nouns, and those are really not syntactic in any way. They're
No.
just nouns sitting there. But as soon
Yes.
as they learn the word more, they
Uh,
start to say more sugar, more apple, more kisses,
that is the first thing they learn, isn't it?
more tickle. I love the more tickle, you know.
More tickle.
And so more is this operator that then start. You know, it's again now. I think Lego is not a really good analogy because when you know Legos, you just fit them together. And so
Yeah.
you want something that they fit together, but they accommodate to each other. So when you talk about more apple, you know, it's going to be a little different from more tickle, right?
You're
It,
right.
it does mean recurrence. So you get into the real details of this, and you start to understand that. Well, first of all, the mommy will say, "Do you want more milk?"
Yeah.
Okay, and so the child's picking this up from the what the mom's saying,
Yeah.
and at that point they learn the word more, and they say, "Yeah, more," or
Is it
maybe
just
more
is it
ice
just
cream. You
pure
know,
is it just pure intuition that they understand that more? Well, I mean, how do they get
it's
that
the
without?
situation. Oh, it's the situation. They're seeing mom giving them another one.
Oh.
See, I mean,
Oh.
so that at that moment when they pick up they know milk, and they have this new word called more. They say, "What's more? What's more?"
Yeah.
Okay, and they start and they look out there and they see in the situation that more means she's giving me well maybe a candy. Would you want another candy or more candy?
Right.
You know that might be the clearest case, but or more tickle wouldn't hurt either. You know, so it's a recurrence, and they see
Yeah.
that, and so at the time they learn the word more, they are also learning that semantic relation.
With the increasing of recurrence. Right.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
see that, and it took me
Yeah.
a long time to realize that, you know, because
That's fair.
we were so structuralist back in the '70s, and I think it took a long time
Hmm.
to realize that it is this very embedded, embodied kind of thing that the child is doing, and they're in that situation, and they see more. That's that thing, and then they generalize, of course, after that.
Right.
Yeah.
I
So
mean, that's all they can do.
so when
Go ahead.
adults learn second languages, it's
Mm.
almost like we're trying to um take our notions and put onto them new labels, as opposed to just like a kid like experiences the language and kind of responds.
This
Is that
this
the
is actually a
differences?
part real quick. I hate to interrupt, but I wanted to let you know, Brian, that Don Don works with developmentally disabled children. Isn't that right, Don Don, or am I
Yes.
incorrect about
Yeah.
that?
I think I've
Yeah.
seen. Have I seen your name around somewhere? It does look familiar.
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I don't know.
Maybe. Okay.
He does though. He does a really good job, and it's what he does every day. So I think he has a pretty good idea. I don't want to throw his question in the
So
garbage.
are
I was
these
just
autistic children?
Mostly autism. Yeah. Mostly
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
autism.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
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 And that is tough because their social relations may not be up to
Yeah.
snuff. Yeah,
Usually, from my experience, language becomes extremely rigid, extremely
that's right. That's what we
hyper
said.
specific. Where if you use the wrong word or you use a word in a different context, where those who are much higher functioning, they have these other series of implications of what that word means that don't even exist within the social context of the usage of the word. So
So they just got it wrong, sort of. They because they weren't taking in the same stimuli as
correct.
everyone else. Yeah,
They weren't understanding it to a full scope, and then now the word has become very rigid,
Yeah.
yeah.
or even sometimes the words become meaningless in a way. In other times,
Do you remember your question, Don? And I'm sorry, I just thought I'd throw that in there.
so we talk about the painfulness of learning a second language is a process that you is that does that when you just say that pain, I hear I speak two languages. I grew up speaking Hebrew. I moved to the United States. I learned English. Spanish, don't forget, it became too much. It's
Mm,
almost like I was trying. For me, learning that language was just putting a new face to words I've already known and
sure.
ideas
Yeah,
I've already known.
that's right. Yeah,
And that's how adults learn languages, in a sense, as opposed to the way
mostly.
kids
Yeah,
learn
yeah.
languages.
That's right. Yeah,
Is that because we already have a language that we
sure.
think through, and kids don't have one?
Oh
What?
yeah, I
What?
mean, I've written a lot on this stuff, yeah, and actually, one of the reasons I got down, I really about 20 years ago, I really moved from doing child language into doing second language learning
Mm.
because I was really worried about this whole notion of the critical period. Because if we do have a critical period, then maybe Noam's right.
Maybe
Okay,
he explained.
you know, because maybe there is a Eugene, maybe there's a little box in the head, you know,
Yeah.
and so I really did a lot trying to understand why is it difficult for older people, to learn the second language. First of all, we found out that in fact you can do pretty well if you have the time and the patience to learn.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and the thing about is that children have no alternative.
Mhm.
Aren't the children's brains creating neural pathways like hundreds of times faster than we are, maybe even thousands?
You would I don't know about those numbers, but
Yeah,
they're
Yeah,
I, th-
I
I
don't either.
think
I
they're
just
just
know
their
it's a lot.
neuroplasticity is a bit higher because they're more of a blank canvas.
Yeah,
There's less impressions, less repetitions, less instantiated like behavioral patterns, and like
right.
thinking.
So they're more of a blank slate,
Yeah.
basically. Yeah.
okay. Well,
and
I
and
know. Yeah, I'm with
that's
you.
good and bad because as Don says, you can just map from Hebrew to English, right? And you're going to find the words are the problem is you can't map the phonology
No.
and you can't map some of the syntax. So there are some things, but you can map the lexicon. So adults are really good at picking up the words in a second language. They're actually much faster than children, but they're
Wow.
really bad at doing the articulation because you can't pull a French F into an English F. I mean, they're all just a little different.
Okay.
And anyway, I ended up with six languages, so I'm not quite as anti-language as you are.
Yeah, yeah. Six languages. That's impressive.
Yeah, thanks.
I've always struggled with languages in general, like in my life. I've always have a hard time picking them up and stuff like that. So
So I
Yeah,
just
I
answered.
think
I
there
answered.
is something going
Oh, I'm
on
sorry.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. Just for the hell of it, and for our audience, I looked it up. A baby is born with about 100 billion neurons, and an adult has anywhere from 85 to 100 billion. So I'm assuming it's more about the neuroplasticity, like Don
Yeah,
Dan said. I'm not
we
sure.
we don't grow new neurons except in the hippocampus,
Yeah, yeah.
and so it's all about the connectivity business,
Hmm.
and but that's good enough. I mean, our computer is so huge in here. The ability of
hmm
our
It's
brain
a lot.
is way over that. This is what Morton Christensen, one of my other favorite scientists, has been pushing. Look, the brain's so smart. We can learn second languages. It's just that we're not always motivated and don't have the time and the exposure.
Yeah.
And we have this other thing, which we have interference from our first language, which is a
interference.
huge problem. A negative
Someone working 40 to 60 hours a week, I imagine, is not going to have the mental
email,
span.
email.
Yeah.
Interesting thing about the interference in Hebrew, varod means pink, and in Spanish, verde is green.
Yeah,
And for the longest time, I could not think of verde to mean green. No matter how many times you asked me, how many times you said it, how many
yeah,
exams I took, in my head, that word meant pink.
yeah.
So,
May I ask you, did that have anything to do with dyslexia?
no, it just sounds too similar.
Okay.
But,
Yeah.
but when we get really good fMRI, this optogenetics, we're eventually going to be able to see where these words are actually activated, really down on the
I
cellular level.
agree. Yeah, I
Do you
agree.
think
And
they are? You think they're like actually like activated at at a specific
right,
space in
yeah,
the
we
brain?
did some computational models, and they show that there's a self-organizing maps that occur.
Mm.
Mm.
In a child who is coming up in a bilingual family, the maps are basically they're separated. You learn
Mm.
English, you learn Cantonese, but later on, if you learn your English later, then the English becomes dependent on the Cantonese, so it kind
Oh,
of
I see.
interpenetrates. And
Interesting.
at least on the computational map, this is a map of self-organizing map, so to speak. It's a computer map, but
Yeah.
I think the brain is probably doing something very close to that, and it's probably got little lexical fields in our. This is basically temporal cortex.
Yeah.
That area right here with the superior temporal and the medial
Yes.
anterior
This
temporal,
side.
and yeah, right there. So we got your temporal temples, and and down in there, I think we're organizing these little lexical fields, and that's where your little Hebrew and your guy got it fighting with each other.
I see. I see. I see.
Yeah, and but
So
then
so which dialect wins out?
it depends on the activation of the sociolinguistics.
Yeah.
So code switching is really interesting. How is it that you manage to, I start this sentence in English y termino en español.
Mm. Yeah.
This is how do you decide at one moment that I'm going to start speaking another language?
How do you keep track in terms of like the abstractness in your mind of six different languages? Which one is your main that you try to focus all the semiotics on the other ones, or does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But I was listening to Noam. Yeah, you guys asked him about. I think it was in Pangburn. They asked him about inner speech, and
Yeah,
I didn't like his answer. But obviously, and he dismissed like Vygotsky without understanding him and things like that. But that's okay. But he did. I mean, it is true that it's very hard to monitor your inner speech. I mean, and that's not what Vygotsky meant anyway. But I've been noticing very much that a lot of the times I just sit there and suddenly the concept comes to me in German, and that's all. It just comes to me in German,
that's impressive.
and
I think that's
or
so
Hungarian. I don't for some. My Spanish is fine, but somehow it it's so close to English that it doesn't seem different to me almost.
cool.
Uh,
Hmm.
and my French is a little weak, so it doesn't that doesn't happen.
It
But
doesn't show up.
it's ideas and phrases come to you. I think. Um,
That's
so
weird.
so I don't know. Boy, I wish I knew more about what was going on. But some activation is going on in those little neurons down there.
We will
Okay,
get there. Neuroscience and neurobiology, they'll get there. We'll get
it's
there.
going to be
Well,
fascinating.
interestingly, this is making. I recently was on vacation in Spain. I went to Barcelona for
Okay.
4 days, and they say "vale." Like when like they understand something, they say that it's like "vale, vale." I get
Vale,
it, right?
vale, yeah,
Vale,
yeah,
yeah. And all of a sudden, our friends were talking, and I was like, "Vale." Like I started embodying the way they use the word. Like, I
yeah.
never. It's like it's almost like valid. Like that's valid. I get you.
Yeah,
That's
right. That's why we do that now in English. Yeah,
yes.
my pain is valid, right?
Yeah, but
Right.
it's I did have that where all of a sudden because of the social context and the people who were around, it just
Yeah,
became a part of the way I just spoke. I didn't even think about it.
yeah.
Just like showed up.
Yeah.
Um
Well, that I think is another mystery that we don't have. From cognitive psychology is not doing real well in understanding how emotion is activating different cognitions. We've got
Yes.
still have this notion of what I think Don Norman called it cold cognition. That and he said, cognition is not that cold; it's pretty hot. And of
Yeah.
course, Freud thought it was too hot.
I
So
don't. I just personally, I don't think that we can abstract. Well, conceptually separate the the two of those. Does that make sense?
right, no, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
So the brain is an
The
integrated.
the thought with the feeling is a simultaneous thing, right?
Right.
Okay.
So I
Yeah,
have a
that's how I've
colleague.
always looked at it. So
I have a colleague who's trying to push on this whole idea that you don't have as much access to emotion in a second language. Um,
really,
hmm,
yeah. Now, but your Vale is actually an example of the contrary, where there are some ways where the second language can be very emotional to you.
true.
So I think it's just we have to learn a lot more.
yeah. Go ahead, Don. Don.
Intuitively, I resonate with that because I find um music and poetry in Hebrew emotionally affects me a lot more than in English.
Hmm.
That I do find to be
That's
the
what people
case.
say. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because it's not my first
Yeah.
language, it just hits differently.
Well,
Um,
music for sure, right?
yeah, music as well. Yeah,
Oh
in
yeah,
English, I don't even pay
yeah.
attention to
Music
lyrics.
being my favorite language.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I spoke with Professor Lisa Feldman Barrett, who talks about emotions as constructions.
Oh, yeah, she's great. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, she
and
is.
she talks about emotions as constructions, and if
So she's the antithesis with the Ekman theory of the basic emotions, and she tries to argue that there is no, you know, not a place in the amygdala where you have the six
correct,
emotions
yeah,
of
yeah,
surprise and everything. And I think I agree with her findings that you're not going to do, but I still like Ekman. I still
because
think there are, like I was looking at myself in the mirror and I was saying, boy, I'm surprised, and my eyebrows go up.
mhm.
Yeah.
Those are these six fundamental things that have been found in all these cultures.
And
So
also
I think,
primates as well. We can recognize their emotions on their faces as well.
right, right, right.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. There's
so
many
and the
many different ways to communicate that language.
And the
Mhm.
reason why I brought that up is because you said there are places where the words are coming from, but wasn't that like when they tried to find the engram, like where memories are, like the place where this memory is stored?
Yeah.
Is there? Do you really think that there's gonna that? language and words are the same way, or no?
No, no, no. I know so it's a computer architecture. Like if you took apart a large language model,
Okay.
you would never find anything anywhere.
Okay.
But you would find some tendencies, and people are doing a lot of this work now, trying to go through the deep learning, and they find that the higher levels are,
Yeah.
more abstract levels, and the lower
Yeah.
levels are the perceptual pieces of which things are formed, and it really maps to the kind of processing that the brain is doing across the visual system, where you're pulling out the lower level, contrasts and colors,
Yeah.
and you're
I mean,
piecing them together.
idealistically, it'd be wonderful if it was the same thing, because then we could
So
analogously.
far, it's looking very similar.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too,
Interesting.
and I don't see a way around it as far as like current neuroscience looks at it. And we can't take an fMRI that is like a constant process. It's a snapshot, right?
Right, right.
Yeah.
But the point is that all of this stuff is still vibrating as you're going through the. It's
Yeah.
like it's not like you finished the. Fodor wanted it to go boom, 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 and it's a module, but it's all the beginning is still vibrating as you're going up the chain, and everything. I think your question is, can you separate emotion from the word? No,
Mm.
but are there some parts of the brain that get activated, particularly when you say banana, and what happens actually? This is that whole notion of hub and spoke model, that the temporal cortex is the hub, and then it projects out to all the different areas of the brain for smell, uh, tactile,
Mm-hmm.
visual. So, slipping on a banana,
Yeah.
Okay.
peeling the banana,
Our
and
sensory network, basically.
yeah, yeah. So that
Mario Kart.
it is going out like that.
What was that, Don Don?
It said Mario Kart. When you throw the banana behind you to make your opponent
Oh
slip.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. So I'm gonna I'm gonna wrangle us back in again because I have an important question. I think you wrote, and this is for the audience. You, David. Why am I calling you David? Brian. You said that we can better understand language learning as a process grounded on competitive Darwinian processes that operate across a variety of timescales, including a phylogenetic scale, an ontogenetic scale, and a synchronic processing scale. Can you tell me a little bit about each of those?
okay. Well, first of all, let me say that my approach is that there's Darwin, and then there are levels, which is basically my hero there is Herb Simon. But any systems theorist with levels of and basically linguistics, that there's phonology and lexicon and okay.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. But I think the really unexplored area is timescales, and it's not that we don't know that there are timescales, but the point is that we don't understand the relation of processes that are going on a very quick timescale with those that are going on a slow timescale.
The synchronic is the quicker one, right?
Yeah, the synchronic is well, it's the down to the neural.
Oh,
We've got two little temporal guys, two little words down in this temporal cortex that are fighting with each other. Is this really a peach or an apricot? You stutter, or you take a longer time because of or some semantic interference,
yeah.
or and then it comes out. Okay, it comes out. But the other thing is that some things are very fluent. So there's all this low level temporal dynamics, and that eventually leads to changes in the language over hundreds of years. I
Right.
mean, because what happens is all those funny little things that went on um, start to level out the language, make it so certain things are more likely to come out than others, and then they get picked up bit by bit into the next generation and the generation. There's some great stuff in Brazilian Portuguese
Portuguese.
Yeah.
as it changed from continental Portuguese
Right.
and
Is
you
this
know,
the competition model?
competition model, but this is really the work I think of people like Joan Bybee, who have really looked at phonological effects as they talk about
Oh, yeah.
erosion. We did more syntax, and
Oh,
that's
okay.
true, but these are the people that go down into they measure the articulatory stuff.
Yeah, the phonemes and all that. Yeah, yeah.
Not just, yeah, the phonemes and how words. Well, one is like French elision, where les oiseaux. So the s comes in, but it doesn't. The other les gabinets. Okay, so you drop it, but the way in which words are starting to fit together is is emergent over time. Well, of course, now French is what it is, but I mean, early
Right.
on in early French, they went through this process where people started to say things quickly, and that's how languages change, is by people messing up,
Yeah.
basically.
So Brazilian Portuguese is people messing up
Yeah,
continents.
basically, yeah. No. I mean, every language is people. Every language is people messing up, right? I
Are
mean,
we just messing up Latin?
we did that a long time ago.
Oh, okay, okay.
Well, Latin was messed up by the Romans
Oh
already,
yeah,
because
yeah,
there was the Vulgate, and the people weren't talking like Cicero. They were talking this very very limited, didn't have all the case markings, and it was good enough.
yeah.
Yeah. So
It
so
was good enough. It survived. It was well enough to do the task. Is that where the evolutionary model goes
Well,
in?
that's yeah. Well, that of course is very important. Yeah, but what is the task now? That see, there was this whole thing between formalists and functionalists, and you were a functionalist or a formalist,
Yep.
and then people like um, well, argued that the functionalists don't know what their functions are, but it turns out a lot of the functions are social functions. They're
Mm-hmm.
marking your social nature. Uh, I'm not coming up with good examples, but my skateboarder son would give you some. Yeah,
No,
you
that's
know,
okay.
Well, English.
phrases that you just say, and ways you talk that it turns out. Well, Bill Labov was probably the guy who really did the greatest work here, and he showed that that young women are there are two groups of people that are the innovators of the language. One is 20-year-old women who are bored taking care of their kids. Okay.
Interesting.
And the other are 13-year-olds,
Skateboarders.
skateboarders,
Yeah.
guys. Yeah. So
So,
those are the innovators, and they developed this, like, yeah, whatever.
I wonder.
well,
I
it's like an urban dictionary kind of
You
language.
got it. You got it. You got it. You got it.
Go ahead, Don Don.
English, at least in the United States, we live in a very litigious society in the United States as compared to other countries, right? Where uh, one of the things that I know a lot of people say when they come to the United States, everyone sues people over everything. Everything's always taken to court. A lot
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
things are
Yeah.
done through
Yeah.
court. Is it things like that, litigiousness of the society, that begin to dictate the proper usage of the language, as it's like, as
Because it
opposed
is
to
a social
it's a
construct. Is that what
usage
you're
of it,
saying?
right? It's the tool for it, as opposed to other
Yeah.
languages that aren't as litigious or have other things they have to do in their society.
There've been a couple linguists who've looked at this a little bit. I don't know what they've really concluded.
Okay, what are your intuitions?
Yeah. What are your
Well,
intuitions? I'm interested in what you think.
I mean, I think the other thing is that the American society is not a single thing, right?
No, it's not.
We've got all this polarization and stratification, regional variation, um,
Hmm.
age differentiation, and then
Demographics till
you've
the
got
end
your
of time.
kids who don't speak very well, Don, right? I mean, they're a different group, ASD, right? So so there is a group for whom this litigious practice is really important, right? I agree. But aren't those like the people who watch Politico or something?
I guess,
Mhm.
but I mean, all of government for me is what it's built around this language,
Yeah,
how we
yeah, yeah,
get
yeah, yeah.
how we organize ourselves
Oh,
and dictate what you need to do and you need to do is built around this type of language.
you know who did that is Jerome Bruner.
The
I don't know
Rome
if you've run
Bruner.
into his name. He was
No.
a child language student. He studied child language, and then at some point he got into the new school and everything, and he really turned into and he developed this theory of narrative, which is sort of Vygotsky basically. It's called the New York School. It basically says that that culture is a narrative basically. Okay, and he got into the idea of law as a narrative.
Okay.
And it really does work. It really does. It's a story. You put it together. It has its and I think the more you look at legal terminology, what does it mean to be originalist? you know,
Originalist.
originalist. That's the
Yeah, those who
right.
they interpret the Constitution through the lens of the original writers of the
Right, right,
Constitution.
right,
Oh,
right.
okay, okay.
Whatever. This is a story that you're making up for yourself. What is it?
Correct. You're making a story. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, what did they? What, were the guns used in the second? All the what did it mean? The second interpret the Second Amendment. And it's a story that we're telling ourselves. So I think to some degree that story, but it's a very complex story, right? So that's I think your question is that it does the language that has emerged around that. Um, and all the legal isms and legal cases
Hmm.
is part of that larger sort of dialogue.
Yeah.
But
I would say probably the two things that are increasing language, just the amount of language that we have the most would probably be law and medicine. You know what I mean?
oh
Uh,
well, yeah, the medicine is unbelievable, unbelievable.
yeah, yeah. It's
Well, of
so
course,
many
law,
words, it's
yeah, right, sure,
ridiculous.
law, yeah,
Yeah.
right. But
I, Go ahead, Donda.
I have nothing to say.
Oh, I was gonna ask about the competition model. Can we talk about that for a minute?
right,
Or
right, right. So
yeah.
basically, we ran these. Oh, I think we have 150 published studies. Okay.
Oh God.
Yeah, well, not all.
A lot of
Not all.
work.
Some are with colleagues and people who use the method.
Yeah, Elizabeth Bates, is that you
Yeah,
and her
Elizabeth
work?
Bates. I
Okay.
actually did recently. I did a interview with Scientific American
Oh,
about Liz as what they have a series called "The Forgotten Women of Science." And I don't think she's forgotten. Okay, not
Okay.
not close, but they're sort of like Madame Curie and or whatever. But she and I worked together a long time. She's great, and she was
excellent.
really an emergentist.
Yeah.
In some ways, really before I got all into all the details. But
You're slowly convincing me of the emergentist position. So
well, here's the trick: is basically emergentism is actually science.
yeah, I see
Okay,
what you mean.
and
Yeah.
linguists have actually not been doing science; they've been doing descriptive work. I mean, they haven't been doing the explanation side.
Yeah, we need to know the neuroscientific
Yeah,
correlate,
you got it
right?
right.
We need to we because if it's happening in the brain, we should be able to see how and why it's happening, or how and where
Or
it's happening.
predict or how it's going to develop as well.
Right.
Right, right. And
But it's
I'm of
not
the
just the brain,
mind.
though. It's also the social pressures that are
Yes,
created. So
yes.
one of the big parts of the competition model are also the constraints. And Liz was really good on this. I was mostly looking at the interaction of, oh, do you want to mark the topic or the agent, or do you want to mark the perspective, what I call the point of view from which the sentence is constructed.
Right.
And if you don't care, if all you want to do is mark the topic, then you use a passive. So instead of saying the dog chased the cat was chased by the dog. So,
Hmm.
so you can have these different structures. What happens is that one motive will win out over another, but usually they're what we call peaceful coexistence. Mostly they come together in most sentences, but when they break apart, then they divide the spoils. That was another one of Liz's phrases, and
Divide the spoils.
she was a word
Well, what is the competition between them? I think I'm missing that. What is the competition between?
between between the active and the passive.
Okay.
When do you have when mostly we use active sentences, but when sometimes the motives break apart, that coalition breaks apart. You could think of it in politics, even, right? Look at Israel.
Oh, that's a whole other thing.
Don't look at Israel.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
So
When the coalition
yeah.
breaks apart, then one side or the other is going to win. And in the case of the passive, the topic wins. You begin the sentence with the topic that you want to talk about, or it could be, and it's not the agent. The agent loses, and you say the dog was chased by the cat. Well, I'm sorry, you don't have cats chasing dogs, but anyway, the cat was chased by the dog.
Hey, I have seen little chihuahuas being chased by
Yeah, it's
cats.
true. It's true. It was a
So
tough cat, right? Yeah, you got it. You got it. So in that case, the agent gets what we call the booby prize, and it sits out in the by clause. So you still express the notion, but it's not, it's not part of that coalition.
Is a prepositional phrase a by clause in this instance?
Well, so the prepositional phrase, yeah, right, the by clause. That's right. Yeah,
Okay,
the
okay,
by the dog
okay.
or by the cat, whichever one.
Gotcha. I was just making the connection there in my
I
mind.
used to have tons of professors tell me, "Stop writing in passive. Stop being so passive in your writing."
But
I
there
would do
are
that a lot.
reasons for passives. That's the point. Yeah, and so that that's some of that. You just have to ignore that. So actually, so another good example is that Finnish has three passives. We have basically two. We have the regular passive, and the other one is the cat got chased by got chased. Cat was chased. The cat got chased. And
Yeah.
passive and Spanish has se escapó or se cayó. You have that. So languages have different ways of making, and what in Finnish, the reason you have the extra passive is you don't want to accuse anybody of having done something. So
Yeah.
Hmm.
there are these other motives that come in there besides just the agent
Mm-hmm.
or the
Emotions come in there too.
yeah. So
So, so the other one is almost like a non-accusatory, where there's no like like normativeness. You did something wrong.
in Finnish, yeah, you say I don't
Interesting.
know who did it. I don't want to. I'm not going to put any blame on anybody. But this thing it got dropped.
Yeah.
Basically,
So so like if I say the cat got chased by the dog,
yeah.
right, and then I say the cat was chased by, what is the word in Finnish that goes in there that
I
makes it
don't know
like I'm
Finnish.
not?
I'm sorry, I don't know Finnish,
Oh, okay.
there's another one which says I'm absolutely not going to. You can't have a by clause with it. You can't state the actor. You just have a verb. It's like the cat got chased and stop.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah, just stop
I
right
see
there.
what you mean.
Hmm.
There's really no substitute in that
Well,
passive sense,
yeah,
right?
in English we always assign responsibility, but I don't know if you've been to Finland. They're
I have not. No.
oh, they're
I'd
great.
love.
They're different. They're different.
I'm going to read this for the audience. It says here on your page, and I think this is cool. Competition model studies have shown that learning of language forms is based on the accurate recording of many exposures to words and patterns in different contexts. If a pattern is reliably present in the adult input, the child picks it up quickly. Rare and unreliable patterns are learned late and are relatively weaker even in adults. Now that's interesting to me.
Now, was that one of your audience or was that Chat GPT?
That was your page.
Oh,
Your
I said that.
yeah,
Okay.
that's on your
No, that was accurate. I'm very happy to
yeah,
see.
yeah, yeah. No, if it was on ChatGPT, I'd be impressed. I don't.
Yeah, but it's a little more detailed than that because what we found is that children they don't know about reliability quite yet, so they pick up the sort of what we call the prototypical form, which in English is the subject chases the dog chases the cat, and then later on they start to look at these imbalanced forms like the passive or languages that allow free word order. So in Cantonese, they start with a very rigid word order, which is subject, verb, object, but then they soon start to realize that you can start moving words around. Okay. And at some then and it gets the story gets more complex, but the point is that eventually they do go the like we're talking about 5-year olds, 6-year olds, they start to pick up reliability. They want the cue to be not just present, not part of of this coalition, but the prototype is a coalition.
Okay.
But they want it to be the one you can count on.
The
Okay.
return on
Hmm.
investment one.
Yeah, return on right, right. And some languages really have that. Hungarian has an accusative that's it. Once you got it, you're done. That's the. But other languages are really messy. you know,
English seems pretty messy.
well, no. English is very no. That's the thing about English. English is word order, is strict word order, subject, verb, object, and the passive is rare, and we very seldom move objects up front. I mean, only in poetry. So we
Hmm.
are really pretty strict, and we also have pretty good cues about the pronouns because of the he and the she. So there are
Yeah.
some cues in English that are actually pretty reliable for
Okay. Well,
basic English. Yeah.
that, and it's spoken pretty much everywhere in some way. So that is extremely
I'm
helpful.
not defending. I'm not going to defend you. I saw some conversations you had. What was it with Poge, who about international English and imperialism.
Oh, I don't know if I remember that one. That
Okay.
might have been Travis. Travis is our leader here. He's the one
Yeah,
who
yeah,
leads
right.
on a
Leader,
lot of those. So you may have seen him, but
organizer.
That's okay.
no,
Yeah,
that's okay. No, it's completely fine. But that's just really interesting to me that these words and patterns in different contexts with different languages can affect the child. That's very interesting. And how does that relate to the neuroplasticity of a child's brain?
well, the kids. Yeah, I mean that is a good question. I mean, kids have the ability to pick up the next structure. Some of this, by the way, goes into a new issue that's coming up in psycholinguistics most recently, which is this whole idea of predictive processing.
Okay.
And that is the bread and butter of these large language models. They they
Oh,
all depend on being able to predict the next word.
yeah.
And I don't want to say that's really what the child is doing. Certainly not when they're 2 or 3 or even 4. But as they get a little bit older, they start to get more fluent, basically,
Yeah.
and they're starting to pick up, the scope of a sentence longer, the sort of the trajectory of the different cues as they move through, just like Chat GPT, I think, really. Um,
Hmm.
and well, I don't think we've worked this out totally, but I think that's what is the development as it moves further on. Dan, I wonder if this wouldn't be relevant to your kids that they're not picking up fluently the flow of the language from word to word as it goes, as it comes into them. A lot of this has to be as you're listening.
Yes. I actually I find that it becomes very rigid. If they like if their parent speaks a certain way
Mhm.
or people around them speak a certain way, when you break that, it becomes very distressing for them. As I find normal kids, if I work with someone from like the foster care system or something like that, they're really kids who don't have this issue are really able to understand. Oh, that's what he meant, or
Yeah,
that's how he's using that, and quickly switch it back and forth.
right,
Kids with
right,
ASP
right.
just can't do that. They just lack the ability to reorient the words after they've used them.
Improvise.
Yeah,
Yeah.
improvise,
Yeah,
recreate.
yeah, that may take us down a different pathway. I'm not
But they
sure.
all love ChatGPT, by the way. I find people with ASP really, really love ChatGPT.
Right, right, right,
Um,
right, right.
they really, really love. I think a lot of it is it lets them a lot of time, it's hard for them to express themselves and what they think, and ChatGPT helps them do that because they'll put in a mess of ideas or a mess, try to explain themselves the same way, and ChatGPT responds to them understanding them
Hmm.
because they speak very idiosyncratically, right? They have their
Well,
very
and there's
own
no
rigid
social
ways of how they talk
pressure.
about things.
There's no social pressure. I
There's no
mean, this
social
is
pressure.
also for second language learners. A lot of the online systems have the advantage of not making you feel embarrassed.
Hmm.
So I think I don't know. Do you think that might be a factor too?
I'm sure it is. I'm really, really sure it is. I think
Hmm.
it's also because there's a lack. People with ASP are very idiosyncratic with how they speak. They have their
Hmm.
own ways of talking about things, or they have again very rigid
Hmm.
definitions for stuff. And for some reason, in ChatGPT, it just doesn't bother them. It just works.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Well, this question though you're asking me, I mean, it's a little vague question, I got to admit, but it takes us up to an area that is really unexplored, which is what are I think we understand basically what's happening with a 2-year old or 3-year old, and even a beginning second language learner. But as you get a little further on, there are new constraints that are coming in, and I don't think we understand quite what a 4-year old is paying attention to when they learn when they advance their language. Now, of course, eventually they become literate. They start
Yeah.
reading, and that's
Yeah.
a huge thing. But what kinds of changes are they listening to in that sort of 3 to 4 year period? But anyway,
Yeah.
we don't quite have it down yet.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too because from what I've read, a child's intelligence usually crystallizes around 7 or 8. So I'm sure that has
Yeah, no, that's
general intelligence, not
right. That's a 6 to 7 year shift, is what they call it. Well, there's everybody makes up a shift wherever they want to put the shift. But, the other one is adolescence.
Yeah,
And so a lot of people, oh, that's the end of the critical period.
yeah.
But no, 7 is really interesting because what. So you say, well, what is the biggest problem? Child's in early language learning. I would say an even bigger mystery, to me, a mystery
Right.
is what we call adoptee language attrition. So these are children who, grew up in Korea and came to America when they were 3, 4, 5, 6, and totally forget Korean.
Hmm.
How
Wow.
can that be?
They don't use it.
Yeah, but if you don't use your Hebrew or your Spanish for a few years, are you going to lose it?
At this point, I don't think so. But I moved to the States when I was 10, and my parents really made sure to annoy us by learning Hebrew. They would make
Okay,
us
okay,
read
yeah, right,
and
yeah.
write. But I know other kids who came at the same age, and their Hebrew is non-functional. They can't read. They can't write. They can
Right.
say
Well,
certain words, but
well, so first of all, yeah, I mean, it depends on, but these are kids who really were totally Korean speakers. And then after they've come to the new country, they just lost everything. I mean,
that's
every
crazy.
single word.
That's crazy.
And so this is the 6 to 7. You was talking about the idea that your intelligence, would you say, congeals at 6 or 7? What
It
was the
crystallizes. That's the
I
word I
like
use.
crystallizes?
congealing
Yeah,
better. It's
yeah,
like a piece of cheese, you know.
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I
right.
talked to I don't know if you know him, Brian, but his name is Scott Barry Kaufman. He was
Oh,
a
yeah, I
psychologist.
know that. Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about general intelligence and everything. He said it usually crystallizes around 7, 8, maybe 6.
That's
So
beautiful because see that if you get to that level and you're an adoptee, you don't lose your language.
yeah,
Mm.
Okay, isn't that fascinating? So it's not a critical period; it's this remarkable age of solidification of your first language.
yeah, yeah.
So there's some mysteries we still need to figure
That
out.
is super
Like, I
interesting.
mean, I would like to know the exact modules in the prefrontal cortex that are engaging and doing this language intuition.
You mean to decide what language to use?
Well, I guess that, and also the ability to, like, that intuition that we talked about earlier. The more for the children and things like that. Um,
Yeah, 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 yeah. So
yeah, maybe my question isn't that
what's
good.
guiding the well, partly it's the process itself. So in order to understand what the mother said, you're doing your best. You're using all your resources. So I wouldn't put it in one little place, but it is certainly that you've got to there has to be some short-term memory storage. And the kid has to think a little bit about more milk, more. What's that?
Yeah,
More milk.
yeah.
I can see myself as a 2-year-old.
I just in general, I think we're going to find the neural correlates to pretty much every behavior at some point. But
Yeah, we will. We will. We will.
that's just me being hopeful.
I mean, I hope so. I
So
hope so.
So you
yeah,
guys never asked me about all our database systems.
No, we
absolutely.
didn't. We
Oh, I
didn't.
didn't want to. I just wanted to ask real quick. I'm absolutely loving this conversation. You can stay as long as you want to, but I didn't want to keep you over time. Are we still good for a
It
little
is
bit?
no, no. I'm good. Maybe 15, 20 minutes at the max
Go
more.
Okay.
ahead.
So let's
Go
talk
ahead.
about these databases because let's talk about these
Yeah, well, one
databases.
of the things that I mean, all this theory stuff is great, but I remember talking to Ray Jackendoff, and he said, "Brian, I envy you. You do data, and I just do theory, and theories are going to get blown away.
Okay. Okay.
They're going to go in the wind. So I
I
don't
mean,
know. I
we're
don't
both
really.
empiricists, so we
Yeah,
like
I don't know,
evidence.
but I don't
Yeah.
know that. But actually, that's not my motive. The reason I was really interested in doing data is that the Chomskyan theory wasn't based on data. I mean, that was a competition model. We really wanted data, and that was empirical data. But the other thing is to actually get data on language usage, particularly for second language learning. We had to get data on what is the mother saying. So we had to, we got to know what the input is.
Yeah.
And when we found that it was really quite simplified. I mean, that the mother was really making it really easy for the child to learn.
Yeah.
We've got some beautiful ones where this Japanese father is sitting there with his child, hour after hour, with one. one simple sentence after another, putting together words, like little
Yeah,
beads on a string. I mean,
yeah.
if if we could learn our second languages with that kind of tutoring,
But wouldn't that be wonderful?
yeah, it would, it would,
Well,
it would.
what are the specific data points that you're even collecting to like
Well,
make sense of
we,
it
we
all?
do recordings of everything. So,
Yeah.
so then I got more and more into this. Like, I want to know all those different forces that are coming. And in the end, what happened is we just got a lot of data and the whole world started using it. I mean, we have this data on dementia that was, we got some transcripts that were collected at the University of Pittsburgh, and they were stored on cassettes that were in the bottom of a mushroom mine. In Pennsylvania, they store things in mushroom mines, and we digitized them. We did. It's a great story. We digitized them, and they became the only publicly available database of language and dementia. And it's being used now by about 1,000 different computer scientists, about 100 different startup firms who are trying to build language models so that they can detect the onset of dementia.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that is awesome.
and,
My grandmother has dementia, so that's yeah.
Well, I mean, once you, but it's important if you can get it early, then you can at least prepare the family. You can do a little bit of mitigation. You can teach people how to deal with it. It's not you're
Yeah.
not going to stop it. There's no medicine for it.
No,
Yeah.
no,
So now,
Alzheimer's the same way.
and we're doing this with psychosis. So trying to understand what are the different varieties of psychosis as they're reflected in the language.
Yeah,
And this is where AI is coming in, because you can use all these classifiers and everything to pull out all the phonetic features. So it's a different world. It really
that's
is.
what we
It
need.
is. I mean, I know that for diagnosing people in psych, they have like the MMPI, the Minnesota Multiphasic Inventory thing, and it has a lot of different personality traits they put together and map to try to diagnose people. Do you think that that's going to be possible with language models?
I think they'll do better than the MMPI.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I really think they'll do better. The MMPI is pretty bad, actually.
If we have
It's
that
pretty good for what we.
neuroscientific,
I think it's one of the best we have. It's not good, but it
Well,
works.
sure, sure. Now that's been always the dialogue. I mean, it's better than nothing, right?
Yeah.
For sure,
yeah,
it's remarkable how the little features of language really crop up.
Mhm.
Um, and also different types of aphasia. So we're using this for all these different things. And then the other thing is for human good. People want to be able to converse with their smartphones.
yeah,
Uh, and that right now people with aphasia or stuttering or even dementia are not able to do that in effective ways. So that there are all these academics, companies that are trying to solve this, which is, and our data is the only one they have because
that's all I got. Yeah,
people have not been sharing data, and so it's fun. It's kind of fun. Um, I personally like to get into the details of interactions. So I like to look at we get a video interaction, we align it with the transcript, and then we look at what does this little pause mean? Why is there a pause here? This is what we call
yes,
conversation analysis,
yeah.
and
Mm.
it's not yet really scientific in the way it should be.
It's
But
very nuanced, is what it sounds like.
well, it's yeah, it's a little bit of insight, knowing why we did this with the Watergate tapes. Why is Nixon humming and hawing? Because he knows that he actually ordered well, he told Mitchell to do the break in. He basically
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
and you can detect it in his speech.
Interesting.
it's crazy.
It's
Go ahead,
almost like
Jojo.
a YouTube algorithm that just learns your habits and what you click on and can just recommend other people who click certain things on. It kind of groups them together.
Well, yeah, it's like that, but it's off of your actual speaking.
Yeah.
Not you're not clicking on the
Not
web.
your click, but your actual speech. And if we agree that speech is like this very fundamental thing for our cognition, and we can't separate speech from emotion, looking at our speech, studying our speech, its patterns, its can tell us so much about a person and their mindset.
Right, right, right. Well, we have, but of course now we all need video to see the eyes, right?
Yeah.
But we're getting some pretty remarkable stuff. Yeah. Anyway,
So,
that's a direction that.
well,
You're fine.
the databases. This is interesting because I've had a conversation with someone, and they were talking about how in the future, 200, 300 years, there's going to be this wealth of information. People just go on the internet and look up everything. But I kind of have a suspicion that in 200 years, a lot of this is going to be lost if people don't actually find ways to record it. Is okay, so, right? Do you think that there's something to that, that we are going to lose a lot of
Yeah,
Learning,
no,
like,
I'm with
yeah,
you. Both sides of that, definitely. So I can hear the idea. Oh, it's all going to be wonderful. I used to think that back in 2005, I thought, just turn on the spigot and you get all this data. But the problem is government regulation.
yeah,
The IRB and the all the constraints on data sharing
Mhm.
are just enormous, and you really have to really be careful to have everything de-identified, have full informed consent.
yeah.
Don't try to do it in Sweden.
Why not? Why not in
Well, I mean,
Sweden?
the internet at least got linguists to be able to communicate more quickly and efficiently with each other, right?
That's true. No, that's
No,
true.
but I want to know why not in Sweden. Why not in Sweden?
Because their law they had some problem at the University of Göteborg, and it blew up, and somebody's data didn't want to be shared or something.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
and but I've been doing this now for like 40 years, and I've never had a complaint. So just got to be careful. Not don't put out a video with somebody engaged in a drug deal. Right.
Go ahead, Donna.
No, I'm just thinking, add this video to this audio to the database. People having a
Yeah,
conversation
yeah,
about
right. So this
linguistics.
could be, but
I
really,
think in the future that we will have ways to recover data in which now we think is irretrievable.
that's true. That's true.
I think that sometime in the future they may be able to, through however they're going to do it, quantum computing or whatever, find this conversation 100 years from now.
Well,
You
the
know?
Wayback Archive, right?
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, I mean,
that's
I
how
use.
that's how that's how I read the news without paying for it.
Yeah. So I mean, I think this whole work with database is and we did 34 different languages, and so it's really heavy linguistics, but it's really not the theory stuff. And I really think emergentism. I just want to say one more thing about emergentism,
Please.
which is that really what's interesting is to dig in what we can call the constraints. Now, the constraints actually turn out to be mechanisms. So if you do the van der Waals forces and the hydrogen bonds, those are actually mechanisms, but they're mechanisms that constrain the way in which the amino acids are going to be put into the sheets or the helices.
Okay.
So that I think is what is the constraints on your memory for verde versus what the Hebrew word was. There's something going on there that is forcing that particular competition. Or what is the constraint on learning more? Why is it that the kid with ASD is having these rigid things, whereas the other kid is just more flexible?
Mhm.
And that we have really good models, and a lot of them are brain models about those constraints, like memory consolidation. We have all this stuff about learning a second language. You do better if you sleep on it.
Yeah.
That
Okay.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So all of these constraints are part of that emergence of the structure,
Mm,
and
gotcha. Yeah.
that's the real message, really.
Yeah. And this emergentism is through Darwinian
Well, it's
imperatives, right?
competition. Yeah,
Yeah,
competition.
and this isn't any. We need to get to empiricism. You know what I mean? I agree.
Yeah.
Can you explain really quick, just for me, linguistic nativism? Because you said you were eschewing. Yeah,
Yeah.
you were eschewing the difference between those two, right?
Yeah. 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 Well,
What
I
is?
think that emergentism makes the whole empiricism nativism dichotomy disappear.
Okay.
Oh, I love to get rid of dichotomies. That's my favorite things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hate
Absolutely.
dichotomies.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I
Yes.
try to get rid of yin and yang for me.
No, no, we can't. I don't know
My
if we
wife
can
would
get
love
rid of.
that. She's a Tai Chi person, and they keep on giving her a hard time about having too much yin.
Oh yeah, we got to have dichotomies. That's just the
Yeah.
nature of
No, but
existence,
no,
right?
screw it.
to the degree that we have the time scales, and we know that the time scales are emergent from the earlier time scales,
Mhm.
we can have a certain type of nativism. We don't have to throw the phylogenetic baby out with the baby. I mean, certainly we emerged language for sure, but it was an emergent process. It
Yeah.
wasn't like I wish I had Liz Bates here to channel.
Oh, I would love that.
She was so good on this stuff. But
Maybe we could talk
yeah,
to her in the future. I would really like to get
maybe
her
maybe
opinion.
she's up there in some in some conceptual world. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think,
Okay,
did you
I'm going
say
to let
about
you guys
15 or
go.
20? I
Yeah.
don't want to keep you too long, my friend. Are you good? Are
Yeah,
you
yeah. I think I should
all
reemerge
right?
with my wife.
Well, everybody who came to watch us tonight, we really appreciate you coming and hanging out. Please go subscribe to Don Prager's channel, and
Thank
please
you.
go and look up. You have any books, Brian?
Yeah, we have about three. They're mostly collections of chapters on the same theme. So one is competing motivations book,
Okay.
and another is we have a handbook of language emergence. Okay,
Okay.
and so I mean, I wrote the introduction and several chapters and everything, but
Right.
my colleague on that was Mike William O'Grady, and he's great on syntactic, like the Lego blocks fitting together. But and I had a couple earlier ones from the '80s, but those are the two I'd say: the Handbook of Language Emergence and the Competing Motivations in Language Usage and Grammar.
Right.
And I really got to write another one as soon as I stop
I
doing
think
all
so. I
the
think
databases.
so.
I'd love you to write a book on this, man. I would love to read a
Oh, I've written it and ripped it up a couple times.
Well, to start again, well, go ahead. If you're a real nerd, you care about this stuff, and you're interested, go read it. I'm sure you'll enjoy it.
Everyone, we appreciate you for coming, and we're going off now.
Okay,
See
I'm
you
off.
later.
Okay, bye bye.
Bye bye.